ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नष्टप्रायेषु अपश्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 28, Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. We are at text 31 in the middle of the purport. Yeah, please continue.
Among Vaishnavas, there may be some differences of opinion due to everyone's personal identity. But despite all personal differences, the cult of Krishna consciousness must go on. We can see that under the instructions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj began preaching the Krishna consciousness movement in an organized way within the past 100 years. The disciples of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj are all God brothers. And although there are some differences of opinion, and although we are not acting conjointly, every one of us is spreading this Krishna consciousness movement according to his own capacity and producing many disciples to spread it all over the world. As far as we are concerned, we have already started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and many thousands of Europeans and Americans have joined this movement. It is spreading like wildfire. The cult of Krishna consciousness, based on the nine principles of devotional service: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam, will never be stopped. It will go on without distinction of caste, creed, color, or country. No one can check it. The word bhokshate is very important in this verse. Just as a king gives protection to his citizens, these devotees, following the principles of devotional service, will give protection to all the people of the world. The people of the world are very much harassed by so called religious principled swamis, yogis, karmis, and jnanis. But none of these can show the right way to become elevated to the spiritual platform. There are primarily four spreading devotional services all over the universe. These are Ramanujacharya Sampradaya, the Madhva Sampradaya, the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, and the Nimbarka Sampradaya. The Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya in particular comes from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All these devotees are spreading this Krishna consciousness movement very widely and giving protection to innocent people who are being so much embarrassed by pseudo avatars, swamis, yogis, and others. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Now here Srila Prabhupada gives another explanation that amongst the Vaishnavas there may be many disagreement. So here, the Malayadhwaja giving birth to many thousands and thousands of sons and protecting the entire world from one Manu to another. So this is referring to the Srila Prabhupada refers here to Krishna consciousness mission and the so many spiritual activities being spread all over the world. And Prabhupada says that there are many bona fide disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. There are many bona fide sampradayas. And all these sampradayas, all these disciples, they are trying to propagate Krishna consciousness or spiritual activities as per their capacity. Krishna Shakti vina nahi tara pravartan. So, to the degree one is empowered by Krishna, to that degree one can spread Krishna consciousness. Right. And therefore, Prabhupada says, when we are spreading the mission like this, there will be always some differences. And the important lesson for a devotee is never take a very firm side when there is a Vaishnava disagreement. Okay. Especially when two senior Vaishnavas are in disagreement with something, one should not take any one side. Because the Vaishnavas, they themselves, they will disagree, they will agree, and they will go back home back to Godhead. But if we take side, what will happen is we will commit Vaishnava aparadh, it will choke our devotional service, and it can be a big hindrance. And ISKCON being a very open international organization with diverse personalities coming in ISKCON, one should be always very careful not to look for the controversy within ISKCON. ISKCON is like Kalpavriksha. Whatever you want, you will get it. If you are looking for controversy, you will get the controversy. There are some burning questions in ISKCON, and there are sides. There is one side which is perfectly genuine, perfectly practicing. There are another side which is perfectly genuine, perfectly practicing. But I don't have to take a side of either this or that. Right? Think nothing of it. So this is very important thing. Unless somebody asks my opinion in writing, I will not even begin to think about the activity. This is a very safe position to have it. Right. So Srila Prabhupada says we are also spreading Krishna consciousness. The mission is gone and it is being produced. And just like it will never be stopped, the incessant flow of Bhakti Pravaha will never be stopped. Just as the king gives protection to the citizens, similarly, a time will come when devotees will give protection, to the innocent practitioners from the so-called swamis, yogis, karmis, and gyanis, and especially devotees means from this four sampradaya, and that Srila Prabhupada mentions the four sampradaya, and ISKCON being one of this sampradaya. So, one important point is, one should never be enthusiastically participating in any controversial discussions, right? One should stay away, and one should know what kind of a paycheck we are getting and what kind of problem we are discussing, and then we should protect our devotional service very well. We have seen dozens of people just getting otherwise burnt away by not practicing this principle. Either they are directly out of Krishna consciousness, or their enthusiasm to spread, to preach will be diluted. And therefore, it is very careful not to take, whenever there is a Vaishnava disagreement, one should not take sides. Very simple. Leave the place and, let the thing settle. Text 32. Yes. अगस्त्य प्राक दुहितर उपये मे धृतव्रतां यस्यां दृढच्युतो जातः इद्मवाह आत्मजो मुनिः. Translation.
Translation: The great sage named Agastya married the firstborn daughter of Malayadvaja, the vowed devotee of Lord Krishna. From her one son was born whose name was Dhridachyuta, and from him another son was born whose name was Idmavaha. The name Agastya Muni is very significant. Agastya Muni represents the mind. The word Agastya indicates that the senses do not act independently, and the word Muni means mind. The mind is the center of all the senses, and thus the senses cannot work independent of the mind. When the mind takes to the cult of bhakti, it engages in devotional service. The cult of bhakti, Bhakti Lata, is the first daughter of Malayadvaja, and as previously described, her eyes are always upon Krishna, Ashitikshasanam. One cannot render bhakti to any demigod. Bhakti can be rendered only to Vishnu, Sravanam Kirtanam Vishnoha. Thinking the absolute truth to be without form, the Mayavadis say that the word bhakti can apply to any form of worship. If this were the case, a devotee could imagine any demigod or any godly form and worship it. This, however, is not the real fact. The real fact is that bhakti can be applied only to Lord Vishnu and his expansions. Therefore, Bhakti Lata is Dhrida Vrata, the great vow, for when the mind is completely engaged in devotional service, the mind does not fall down. If one tries to advance by other means, by karma yoga or jnana yoga, one will fall down. But if one is fixed in bhakti, he never falls down. Thus from Bhakti Lata, the son Dhrudachyuta is born, and from Dhrudachyuta, the next son Idmavaha is born. The word Idmavaha refers to one who carries wood for burning in a sacrifice when approaching a spiritual master. The point is that Bhakti Lata, the cult of devotion, fixes one in his spiritual position. One so fixed never comes down, and he begets children who are strict followers of the Sastric injunctions. As said in the Vedas, Tada Vijnanaratham sa gurum iva bhi gacchate samit paniha strottam brahmanishtaham. In the line of devotional service, those who are initiated are strict followers of the Vedic scriptural injunctions. Hare Krishna.
So the allegorical story further continues that the great sage named Agastya, he married the first daughter of Malayadvaja, who was an avowed devotee of Lord Krishna. Asitekshanaha, we have seen the Malayadvaja had one daughter and 7 sons. So Agastya Muni married the first daughter, and Srila Prabhupada refers. From there, the Drudachyuto and Idmavridvadha, they were born. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, Agastya Muni here refers to mind. So Agastya means that, so it is basically the mind and senses are just the instruments. But where we focus the mind is the center of all the senses. And, one cannot work without mind. The senses cannot work without mind. Manashasthani indriyani prakritisthani karshati. Manashasthani indriyani. Okay. So this is the center of all the senses. And therefore, when Agastya, mind, was married, then what happens is, Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayor Vacham Sivai Kuntha Gunanuvarnani. As when the mind is engaged, automatically all other senses are also engaged. And especially the cult of Bhaktilata, she is known as Asitekshanaha, that her eyes were Shamavarna, because she always was holding Krishna in her eyes. And this bhakti has to be offered to the Supreme Lord. So there is a very clear distinction between the Supreme Lord and Devata. Right. So Devata, they are great personalities, but they come under the category of Jiva Tattva. Even you and me can become Devata by having the sufficient credits of Punya. Just like you and me can become a minister if we are selected by a popular vote. Similarly, Jiva Tattva can become Devata. So Devatas are very advanced personalities who are very advanced in Punya, and especially Pancha Devata. They are the great devotees of the Lord. Pancha Devata refers to Lord Shiva, then Durga Devi, Surya Dev, so, and Ganapati. So these are the personalities who are the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are very in detail explained in Brahma Samhita. But the Devata, there is Upasana. Devata, there is Upasana. But the Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna, Lord Vishnu, Lord Rama, Narasimha, there is Bhakti. So the word Bhakti is specifically reserved for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is devotional service. And at the same time, Devatas, they have their own, they themselves are great devotees of the Supreme Lord. But one should not mistake Devata to be the Supreme Personality. This is very important. So Bhaktilata, the great vow, the mind is completely engaged in devotional service, then the mind will not fall down. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. And then this is how, one after another, Prabhupada says, in the line of devotional service, those who are initiated are the strict followers of the Vedic Shastric injunctions. And Vedic Shastric injunctions are very basically simplified by following the 4 regulative principles. Text 33. Vibhajyatanayebyakshmam rajarshirmalayadvajah Aryradhaishu Krishnam Sajagama Kulachalam. Translation.
After this, the great saintly king Malayadhwaj divided his entire kingdom among his sons, Then, in order to worship Lord Krishna with full attention, he went to a solitary place known as Kulachal. Purport: Malayadhwaj, the great king, was certainly a Mahabhagavad, topmost devotee. By executing devotional service, he begot many sons and disciples for propagating the bhakti cult, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Actually, the entire world should be divided among such disciples. Everyone should be engaged in preaching the cult of Krishna consciousness. In other words, when disciples are grown up and are able to preach, the spiritual master should retire and sit down in a solitary place to write and execute Nirjana Bhajan. This means sitting silently in a solitary place and executing devotional service. This Nirjana Bhajan, which is the silent worship of the Supreme Lord, is not possible for a neophyte devotee. Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur never advised a neophyte devotee to go to a solitary place to engage in devotional service. Indeed, he has written a song in this connection. Dushta mana tumi kisher Vaishnava प्रतिष्ठार तारे निर्जरे निर्जनेर घरे तव हरि नाम केवल kaitava. My dear mind, what kind of duty are you? Simply for cheap adoration, you sit in a solitary place and pretend to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. But this is all cheating. Thus, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur advocated that every devotee, under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, preach the Bhakti cult, Krishna consciousness all over the world. Only when one is mature can he sit in a solitary place and retire from preaching all over the world. Following this example, the devotee of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness now render service as preacher in various parts of the world. Now they can allow the spiritual master to retire from active preaching work. In the last stage of the spiritual master's life, the devotees of the spiritual master should take preaching activities into their own hands. In this way, the spiritual master can sit down in a solitary place and render Nirjana Bhajan.
Yeah. So now next is, after this, the great king Malayadhwaja, he divided his entire kingdom into the sons, and to worship the Supreme Lord, Krishnam Sajaga, he retired to a solitary place, Sakulachalam, the named as Kulachal. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, Malayadhwaj was a great king, he was a Mahabhagavat, and he had many great powerful sons and disciples and daughters for spreading the mission of the Supreme Lord. And in other words, Prabhupada says that an empowered Acharya should eventually hand over the baton to the next generation and should retire and perform Nirjan Bhajan, right? So, His Grace Radhesham Prabhu always says, a leader is the one who creates other leaders. A leader is not the one who creates followers, right? Leader is known by creating other leaders. Therefore, we also should be very happy when people with us, people under us, say you are a counselor and we have some counselees. The counselor should be extremely happy when the counselee becomes evolved enough to takes on his own meetings and start his own preaching activities. Okay, that is a very wonderful. But this retiring from the active preaching is recommended only for very advanced devotees. Neophyte devotees, they may feel a sense of accomplishment by such retirement, but Siddhanta Saraswati has very strongly spoken against this. Dushtamanatumi kisera Vaishnava. Pratisthara gare pratisthara tare nirjanera gare tava harinam kevala kaita. That you are sitting in one place and acting as if you have a great taste in the holy name, but it is only. So this is for the neophyte devotee. But an advanced devotee can retire from the preaching activity. And Prabhupada says that the disciples should ensure that the spiritual master gets time for this Nirjan Bhajan and should take on the activities of spreading Krishna consciousness far and wide on behalf of one's spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada personally, he once retired. And then Karandhar Prabhu, and if you read that is beautiful episode. And they just managed ISKCON, and Prabhupada's retirement lasted for 3 days. And after 72 hours, Prabhupada was back in action. And Prabhupada said that no, we have to spread. And he said that just like a warrior dies on the battlefield, Similarly, the preacher of Krishna consciousness should preach and die while preaching. And Prabhupada literally lived those words. We have seen the last picture of Srila Prabhupada. He's translating 10th canto, 14th chapter. And you may see that video also. Even on the day of departure and a day prior to that, Prabhupada dictated his Bhaktivedanta purports, and then he departed. Okay. So as far as we are concerned, we should never aspire for this Nirjan Bhajan activity. One should be constantly engaged in the service of the Lord according to one's capacity. It's 34. Hitva grihan sutan bhogan vaidarbhi madirekshana anvadavat Pandesham Josneva Rajanikaram. Translation.
Just as the moonshine follows the moon at night, immediately after King Malaya Dwaja departed for Kulachala, his devoted wife, whose eyes were very enchanting, followed him, giving up all homely happiness despite family and children. Purport. Just as in the Vanaprastha stage, the wife follows the husband. Similarly, when the spiritual master retires for Nirjana Bhajana, some of his advanced devotees follow him and engage in his personal service. In other words, those who are very fond of family life should come forward in the service of the spiritual master and abandon so-called happiness afforded by society, friendship, and love. A verse by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura in his Guru Ashtaka is significant in this regard. Yasya prasadat bhagavad prasada. A disciple should always remember that by serving spiritual master, he can easily advance in Krishna consciousness. All the scriptures recommend that it is by pleasing the spiritual master and serving him directly that one can attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service. The word Madirekshana is also significant in this verse. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained in this Sandarbha that the word Madira means intoxicating. If one's eyes become intoxicated upon seeing the deity, he may be called Madirekshana. Queen Vidarbhi's eyes were very enchanting, just as one's eyes are Madirekshana when engaged in seeing the temple deity. Unless one is an advanced devotee, he cannot fix his eyes on the deity in the temple. Hare Krishna.
So, as soon as the Malayadhvaj, he departed from the house, his wife, Vaidarbhi, was a very dedicated wife. She also followed him into the forest, giving up Hitva, Gruhan Sutan Bhogan, giving up all the homely happiness. And she followed just like the moonshine follows the moon at night. Beautiful analogy. Josneva Rajanikaram. Like the moonshine follows the Rajanikaram is the moon. Right. This is how she also immediately followed. In the Purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the Vanaprastha stage is that where the wife follows the husband. That means, they will be performing devotional service together. And similarly, when the spiritual master decides to retire, some of his advanced devotees will also follow him and engage in his personal service. This we have seen, that Madhavendra Puri, when he retired, then he was being served by Ishwara Puri. And there are many such examples in the history where when the spiritual master decides to retire, some of the disciples will follow the spiritual master. And Prabhupada writes here, the Grihasthas who are fond of family life should come forward and render this service to one's spiritual master. There is always a limitation on rendering physical service to spiritual master, but the best service can be rendered by following the instructions and spreading the message. Right. Yatha Shakti Yatha Mati. But this is the best way to follow the instructions. And then Srila Prabhupada quotes, this is the easy way to advance in spiritual life. Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasadu. Further, there is a description of Madirekshana. So Madirekshana means, Madira means Prabhupada writes, Madira is the intoxicating beverage, intoxication, and Ikshana means eyes. So when one eyes become intoxicated upon seeing the deity, he is called as Madirekshana. What this means is how excited we become at the prospect of spiritual activities. This is very important. That is called as, the laulyam. How we look at our japa, how we look at our deity worship, how we look at reading Srimad, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, how we look forward going to temple. That is called as Madirekshana, right? How we become excited at the prospect of spiritual activity. Text 35, 36. Tatra Chandravasa Nama Tamraparni Vatodaka Tatpunysalilai Nityam Ubhayatra Atmanon Brujam Kandashtivihi Mulafalaihi Pushpaparnai Trunadakai Vartamanah Shanairgatra Karshanam Tapa Astitah. Translation.
In the province of Kulachala, there were rivers named Chandravasa, Tamrapani, and Vatodaka. King Maledwaja used to go to these pious rivers regularly and take his bath there. Thus he purified himself externally and internally. He took his bath and ate bulbs, seeds, leaves, flowers, roots, fruits, and grasses, and drank water. In this way, he underwent severe austerities. Eventually, he became very skinny. Purport. We can definitely see that to advance in Krishna consciousness, one must control his bodily weight. If one becomes too fat, it is to be assumed that he is not advancing spiritually. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakura severely criticized his fat disciples. The idea is that one who intends to advance in Krishna consciousness must not eat very much. Devotees used to go to forest, high hills, or mountains on pilgrimages, but such severe austerities are not possible in these days. One should instead eat only prasada and no more than required. According to Vaishnava calendar, there are many fasts such as Ekadashi and the appearance and disappearance days of God and his devotees. All of these are meant to decrease the fat within the body so that one will not sleep more than desired and will not become inactive and lazy. Overindulgence in food will cause a man to sleep more than required. This human form of life is meant for austerity, and austerity means controlling sensual indulgence, food intake, etc. In this way, time can be saved for spiritual activity, and one can purify himself both externally and internally. Thus, the body and mind can be cleansed. Thank you, Prabhu.
So now this is the description of the austerities underwent by Malayadhwaja and Vaidarvi. So the king, the province of Kulachala was surrounded by the river, and the king purified himself by taking regular bath there externally, internally, and underwent severe austerity. And essentially, he eventually became very skinny. And Srila Prabhupada gives a purport on being skinny more here. That to advance in Krishna consciousness, one must control his bodily weight, right? And if you know the weight control, unless you're a thyroid patient, the weight control is all about diet. So they say that it is 80% diet and 20% gym or yoga, whatever it is you want to do. But weight is all about diet. And especially the calorie deficit diet we have to take. And then we can very easily control the weight. We have some devotees, at will they will expand their weight and they will reduce their weight. Okay. But such extreme expansion reduction is also not recommended. One should have a balanced, because yoga always means balance. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Right. Not that when I fast, I can just fast, Bhishma Panchak and 5-10 days without, only on the water. And when I eat, then, I can eat 5 pizzas. So one should come to the balance. Samatvam yoga uchyate. And Prabhupada writes here that Siddhanta Saraswati was very strong when he very strongly criticized his disciple simply eating, some of them. at times simply, and he just criticized lovingly that one should not. And Prabhupada said this is why we have the many Vaishnava Tithis and the fasting days, so that one can fast intermittently like this, and one will control the food intake. So overindulgence in the food automatically leads to uncontrolled tongue. Uncontrolled tongue leads to uncontrolled belly, and then uncontrolled sense gratification. And therefore, to be controlling, one's life, tongue is called as radar actually, and this radar is very very uncontrolled. जीवे फेले विषय सागरे तार मध्ये जिह्वाति लोभमोय सुधर्मति ताके जेता कठिन samsare. It is very difficult to conquer the tongue, and therefore we have the strict regulations of no onion, no garlic. We devotees eat only prasadam, the food which is offered to the Supreme Lord. Why? Because this is to control the tongue, and when the tongue is controlled, all the senses will be automatically controlled. So the sense control, Prabhupada writes this beautiful statement in one of the small book, I think Teachings of Queen Kunti. The sense control begins with tongue control. Prabhupada statement. Okay. And this is how one can cleanse oneself internally and externally. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.